So, traveling north and east to the Indian subcontinent, we turn next to Assistant Professor Florian Justwan, who has been teaching in the fields of international conflict and political psychology at the University of Idaho since 2015. At a time when we're struggling to understand the notion of compromise in American politics, Florian is studying territorial attachment and political compromise in his current research, which examines a contested region in Arunachal Pradesh, which is claimed by both India and China. Drawing from such disciplines as international affairs and behavioral economics, this work uses surveys of Indian citizens in order to understand why public opinions are sometimes fixed and others sometimes flexible. Please welcome Florian.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Before I get started with anything, I would like to give credit where credit is due. Much of the work that I'm going to discuss in the next 5 minutes or so has been co-authored with my amazing friend and colleague, Dr. Sarah Fisher at Emory and Henry College. For the past 5 years or so, Sarah and I have been fascinated by the topic of territorial disputes. So these are cases in which two countries disagree over ownership over a particular piece of land. Think about the Crimea dispute, for example. And as you can imagine, there's been a massive amount of research on that topic already. And the general question here is, or a key question here is, what makes those disputes oftentimes so hard to resolve? And the scholarly consensus here is that this is frequently due to public opinion, because hawkish public attitudes force governments into uncompromising behaviors. However, very much to the surprise of my co-author, we noticed that while everyone agrees that we need to study public opinion in this issue area, scholars haven't actually made the effort to conduct public opinion research in any claimant state yet. So this is where we decided to jump in. We wanted to pick a country with a few different territorial disputes, and we wanted to be the first scholars to conduct survey research on this issue. In particular, what we're interested in is who are the people who are in favor of territorial compromise solutions, and what makes them different from their hawkish counterparts. So we ended up picking India as our case study for a variety of different reasons. First, the English language is fairly widespread in that country. Second, virtually every single one of India's borders, such as this one here, is in some way, shape, or form contested. And third, it's a really interesting country that we wanted to learn more about. So Sarah and I traveled to India in the summer of 2016 to meet with survey firms and discuss a project. The goal of that trip was to find a partner that would agree to do a public opinion survey with us about a bunch of different territorial disputes. Upon arriving in India, we noticed that doing survey research in that country is kind of hard. It is one of the most exceptionally diverse countries in the world. By some accounts, there are more than 500 different languages spoken there. And that makes the collection of a nationally representative sample difficult. As a result, we decided to poll respondents in one of India's 36 different states, in the National Capital Territory of New Delhi. This is the political heart of the country. We decided to poll roughly 1,000 respondents and ask them about two different territorial disputes. The first one is about this region here, which is called Arunachal Pradesh. This is one of India's 36 states, but it is claimed by China as part of South Tibet. The other territorial dispute that we asked citizens about is about the area here called Aksai Chin. Aksai Chin is actually controlled by China, but India claims it as part of its own Kashmir region. In our survey, we then asked people about two different forms of territorial compromise. The first one is, can a respondent imagine a scenario in which she would support giving up parts of Arunachal Pradesh? The second one is, Would a respondent support it if India gave up its claim to Aksai Chin in response to China giving up its claim to Arunachal Pradesh? This is what we call a claim exchange. What you see here is that both forms of compromise were very unpopular. The first one supported by only 5% of people, the second one only by about 20% of people. So for our purposes, the question then is, how can we explain these response patterns? And in our data analysis, we found three main predictors. The first one is what we could call foreign policy orientations. We know from previous research that people vary in their general outlooks on global politics. First, there are what we could call militant internationalists. These are people who think that global politics is a very Hobbesian, dog-eats-dog world. And what you see here is the more that people buy into this Hobbesian notion, the less likely they are to support any type of territorial compromise. A second type of foreign policy orientation is what we could call cooperative internationalism. This is all about how much you value trade, treaties, the UN, and norms. And what we found is that the more people buy into this particular worldview, the more likely they are to endorse some type of compromise. A second big predictor of compromise attitudes is people's beliefs and fears about the future. What we noticed in our data set is that a lot of people were worried that any type of compromise with China would only embolden China to behave more aggressively in the future. What we then found, not surprisingly perhaps, is that the more people are worried that any kind of territorial compromise would only embolden China to become more aggressive in the future, these people are also less likely to offer any type of compromise. Last but not least, we also find that attitudes towards compromise have at least something to do with underlying character traits. Most importantly, the more positive someone's view about human nature is in general, measured by their degree of trust in strangers here, the more positive they feel about both types of compromise. So we've written up those results in 3 or 4 different papers now. Moving forward, we're going to team up with U of I colleagues Ashley Kerr and Graham Hubbs, and we're going to do some follow-up research in Belize. In particular, we're interested in the political psychology in Belizean citizens' attitudes about their territorial dispute with Guatemala. I can't wait to launch that survey in hopefully just a month or 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian. That was fantastic.
Thank you so much.